Hello and welcome to the final episode of The Legend of Nobunaga. This week it's the Great Battle of Hakata, which we'll be facing against the Akechi and Ashikaga army, the final battle of the normal game. There is actually one extra level in the game, which I'm not going to be able to show you because you have to complete the entire game again to see it. I'll talk about that later. We're forced to take Amalia van Kaya for this particular battle, which is a little bit annoying, because I haven't trained her up too much, but I have a bit. So it's okay.
He must be defeated if we are to end the chaos. Begin your preparations!
I had earlier guessed that she might become a central part of the story and trained her up a little bit, just in case this exact thing happened. So it's kind of nice that that paid off. So let's see what's going on with the story.
The time has finally come to end all of this.
I first thought you were a simple man with a poor, small talent. But somewhere along the way, you've grown into a truly great man. But still, I want you to know, I hate you.
Remember that this is my battle. I will not let anyone get in my way.
Meanwhile,
after we win this battle, our land will know a time of peace. Lord Nobunaga! What will you do after that?
I've always wanted to be a high-flying hawk.
A hawk?
As a hawk, I'll fly free.
To where, my lord?
The world.
The world?
Someday, the time will come when the West and East mix freely. I would lead that effort. I would cross to other countries. I would bring back the riches of the world to Japan.
Lord Nobunaga! We've heard that a man named Pedro is at the head of the Spanish forces.
Pedro.
Do you know him?
Dastardly and cruel. One of the most contemptuous men I know. In order to win, he will do anything at all.
anything?
I thank you all for following me this far. You have my heartfelt gratitude. We shall start our war council. The final one.
Kessen time! So it looks like it is finally time for the last war council. Let's see what sort of level the game has for us.
Alright, let's begin. We have plans to make.
According to the scouts, this is what we face.
Nagahide never grew in confidence over the stages. Oh well, I guess now is the time to be scared.
We shall win if we defeat the enemy commander, Mitsuhide Akechi. Mitsuhide leads the combined forces of Ashikaga, Mori, Shimazu, Chosokabe, and foreign Spanish forces.
We'll take them all.
Mitsuhide is positioned over here. We should be making a landing here.
So it looks like we're going all D-Day on this one, doing a beach landing. Not sure why.
This battle will decide the fate of our poor land. My lord, let us be on our way. Peace finally awaits us.
It's been a while.
My lord, it is time to deploy.
Every single battle has been from the land and for peace, but it looks like only this one is actually going to bring some peace. Let's see what's going on. We're forced to deploy Nobunaga and Amalia on this beachfront. There's a whole ton of cannons up here, but they're all sort of strategically facing the central area of the beach, and there doesn't look like there's anything to stop you going around the edges, so there is going to be a way to avoid all those cannons. The stage is incredibly simple. All you have to do is fight your way through the 5 or so armies that are arrayed against you in a very linear fashion in order to get to where Mitsuhide is in the final enclosure and take him out. No surprises this time. I was actually kind of surprised at how simple this stage was. I assumed it was going to be a culmination of all the constant ambushes and that Yukimura Sanada would probably show up and keep respawning every 5 seconds. Oh yes, you get some reinforcement units positioned right at the top right hand corner of the map. We're going to show up and be our saviours a little later on. I decided from the beginning that I was going to go up the flanks of the beach in order to avoid those cannons, so you can see me giving the orders here, and also I was going to look for an item in the bottom right hand corner. The conditions here are useless, prepare myself to show down, okay, and destroy the cannons to avoid cannon fire. That is great advice from the conditions. They really must have run up ideas on the conditions, because in the second half of the game they became increasingly pointless.
Impressive. Victory is as good as ours.
All right, let's move out. Remember, we fight for the land and for peace.
And this time we really are fighting for peace. Pretty good. So let's see who's going to win the Great Battle of Hakata. Spoiler, it might be us.
This battle will determine the fate of all. We have with us the invincible and proud Spanish army. As the victors of this battle, we will win an everlasting place in history!
That's not a very good speech. I wouldn't be inspired by the promise of getting a place in history. Especially because they're getting this place for being
Whether
evil.
True or just a dream, I shall win this final battle. I will break the grip of chaos on our world. I fight in the name of hope.
Not just peace now, it's hope as well. You've got it all. Okay, chaps, let's get it on. So as I said, I'm going to take a little flanking maneuver up the side of the beaches, and we'll see if the enemy puts any effort into stopping me doing that. Oh, the Spanish forces find me already right from the beginning, so I have to take a little detour to take them out. All these foreign majors. There's going to be a lot of these foreign majors all over the map. Luckily, they're pretty easy to deal with, especially because they're running in without any support. So as I fight my way up this beach, last time I promised I was going to tell the historical story of how the Sengoku Jidai era came to an end, and how Ieyasu Tokugawa, Nobunaga's ally in the legend, is going to come to rule Japan all on his own.
Attack!
So far we've seen that after the death of Nobunaga, events transpired that allowed Hideyoshi Hashiba to take over the Oda clan and turn it into his own Toyotomi clan, which went on not only to unify Japan, but to try and invade Korea. And I talked about the Korean campaign. It wasn't really a good idea from Hideyoshi. Many historians of Hideyoshi leave it out because it's kind of a stain on his personality. It just had so many negative consequences. Most of the negative consequences were for the Koreans, to be fair. The Korean nation was almost completely destroyed by the war. I read somewhere that south of Pyongyang there are no buildings that exist from the time before the war because the Japanese invaders basically just destroyed everything in their path. So the Korean people really got the short straw, but the Japanese people had their fair share of downsides as well. And particularly Hideyoshi had downsides. In some ways he was punished for his poor decision to go on this world-conquering campaign. Effectively because the campaign was fought mainly by the leaders that were loyal to Hideyoshi. He took men into battle which were loyal to him. Meanwhile back in Japan, the ones that had stayed behind, most of them were not particularly loyal to him. They had declared loyalty to him, but they had no real material reason to be. They were kind of just on his side because he was the victor. Like they had no actual personal respect for him, the great other great leaders. And so basically what he had done, by only taking his powerful allies to battle in Korea, was that he had massively weakened all of his allies by having them expend all their resources on this war and get loads of their people killed in the process, while his potential enemies back at home remained strong. So he kind of unbalanced his own political fortunes by taking all of his allies off to war and managing to have them defeated by the Chinese and Korean armies over a series of years. You can see here in the stage I am now destroying the last of the cannons, so the threat of the cannons has been avoided, and then I'm going to have to move up a little passageway in the center, which is going to compress my forces and finally allow us to get into some close combat. At least it looks like it will. We'll see what happens. So, in 1598 the Korean War comes to an end, and Hideyoshi is dead.
Who would have thought I'd find the leopardess of the Netherlands in a place like this?
The Netherlands?
Just what are you doing
Oh
here?
my god, Amalia's from the Netherlands.
Our mighty king
The mystery has been solved.
He must be obeyed. He has his eyes set on this eastern land.
You plan to take over this country?
I wouldn't know. Amalia, let me tell you something before you die. Have you ever wondered why you were exiled?
It was all for the sake of my plans.
What?
There's no such thing as friends in this world, little Amalia!
What was that?
So I don't know what Pedro's up to here. Apparently the King of Spain wants to conquer Japan and he's somehow involved, but doesn't claim to know what's going on. Very confusing. Anyway, so I think Pedro's forces were stationed just in the little passageway I'm about to enter, but I think they run away as I approach. I can't quite remember. Anyway, I was just saying, Hideyoshi died in 1598, and now he had to solve the issue as he was on his deathbed of who was going to succeed him as the new leader of Japan. He had an heir to his own position, but he was too young to take up the position, so he needed to come up with a regency system, and he did a very complicated system actually of a three-tiered regency system where two teams of regents and administrators known as Bugyo would do all the ruling, and then there'd be a separate team known as the Churo who would mediate between these two teams. So basically he created this huge administration to directly replace him, which would take over the executive power in Japan. Some famous figures who are in this Council of Regents were Teramoto Mori, who I think we're going to be facing here on the stage today. Kakekatsu Uesugi was in there. Toshie Maeda, who's fighting in our army at the moment, was in there. Toshie was one of Hideyoshi's greatest allies at the end of his life. So putting Toshie Maeda on the Regency Council was basically part of Hideyoshi's effort to keep his own personal legacy alive. He knew he had at least someone on the council who was very loyal to him. One of the other people, who I think was one of the Bugyo, was Ishida Mitsunari, who would prove to be the linchpin of the conflicts to come in the upcoming War for Succession. The men were technically supposed to be serving Hideyoshi's son Hideyori, who was the heir to the throne. The idea was that they would hold everything together in the country until Hideyori could come of age, and then take his rightful position as shogun. Now I said that Hideyoshi was relying on Toshie to kind of hold things together, because he knew he was loyal to Hideyori and would keep the Toyotomi clan going strong, but unfortunately Toshie died in 1599, just from 1 year after the council was set up. So it immediately became clear that things were going to be a little bit more difficult than they thought, especially now that they created a huge group of people who had imperial power on this Regency Council, but wouldn't necessarily agree with each other, and had massive armies at their disposal. The stage seemed set for a war of succession from the very beginning. The main character of this war for succession was Ieyasu Tokugawa, who, as I've already said, will be the man who would eventually come out on top. From the very beginning of the Regency system, he had been rather hostile to his fellow regents actually. He kept fostering personal alliances with some of the eastern clans who weren't particularly loyal to Hideyoshi, such as the Date.
Not bad.
It kind of became clear to the other regents and the Bugyo that Tokugawa was up to something, that maybe he was planning to usurp the Toyotomi clan by the Tokugawa clan and make himself the shogun. But they weren't really sure what to do about it. But they were aware that Tokugawa definitely had the capacity to take over the land, because Tokugawa now controlled all of the Hojo lands. Tokugawa had helped Hideyoshi conquer the Hojo as part of the Toyotomi clan's domination of Japan, and as a reward he had been given all of the Hojo lands. I think he actually swapped the traditional Tokugawa lands for the Hojo lands because they were superior and richer, which is also a good deal for Hideyoshi because the Hojo lands were further from the capital. So from Hideyoshi's point of view, he was putting his strongest ally far away from his own power base to make it harder for him to betray him, so it was a pretty sneaky move. Anyway, as I said, the rest of the regents and the Bugyo knew they had to do something about Tokugawa. Tokugawa was the lead regent who had been given special powers by Hideyoshi to decide the fate of the Toyotomi clan after Hideyori died. At this moment in the stage, Ieyasu and Tadakatsu Honda show up as surprise reinforcements, so that was nice. Unfortunately, they show up miles away from where the rest of my forces are and get themselves rather bogged down on a massive amount of enemy forces. And this is going to pressure my units because I wanted to move forward faster in order to link up with Ieyasu and try and stop him from being destroyed as he gradually gets surrounded by the enemy on the open plains. And it causes me to move a little bit faster than I would have wanted to, and take some fairly heavy losses as a result, which you're going to be seeing very shortly.
Regroup and prepare to counterattack.
So, seeking to avoid Ieyasu Tokugawa from usurping the shogunate. The character I mentioned, Ishida Mitsunari, tries to have Ieyasu assassinated, but this scheme fails. It's discovered, and then a whole bunch of loyal Tokugawa generals decide to set up their own little band of assassins to try and kill Ishida Mitsunari. Now Mitsunari makes an interesting move at this stage. I believe at the time he was on the deathbed, he was at the deathbed, sorry, of Toshie Maeda, mourning for his loss, when he noticed that these Tokugawa assassins were coming for him, or at least he became aware, and he basically knew the only way he could survive was if he appealed to the man he had tried to kill, Ieyasu Tokugawa, for help. So he does so, and Ieyasu makes what would prove to be a key mistake in allowing him clemency. He protects Ishida from the assassins and harbours him for the next year or so to make sure that he's safe. Now Tokugawa could arguably have been doing this for political reasons, because even though Ishida was his political and military enemy at this stage, he potentially wanted to keep him alive so he could keep conspiring and keep making it obvious that there was a conspiracy against him, and once it became so obvious he would be able to launch some sort of counterinsurgency campaign and justify suppressing these rebels. But you could also just say it was a mistake. He was too nice. Who knows? Yoshiaki Ashikaga, the shogun, shows up at this point in the stage. So I'm going to taking a little bit of revenge for all the annoyance he's caused us in the past. We'll see how much damage he manages to do to us. He actually proved to be surprisingly effective in battle, unlike his previous appearances, sorry. Anyway, so Ishida has been taken in by Tokugawa, who is now protecting him. But still, whilst Ishida lived, he was still sneakily forming an anti-Tokugawa alliance, even right under Ieyasu Tokugawa's nose. He had convinced some of the great clans, Mori and the Uesugi, to betray Tokugawa, as well as dozens of the smaller clans, including the Shimazu and Chosokabe, who we're seeing on the battlefield here today. Over the next year or so, the threat to Ishida's life kind of passed, and he continued to build the strength of his conspiracy against Ieyasu, particularly in western Japan. The Tokugawa loyal domains were still the dominant force. He still didn't have enough support to actually overthrow the Tokugawa clan. But he did, he had a chance to take a good shot basically. He had this plan. His plan was to have the Uesugi clan distract Tokugawa, because the Tokugawa and Uesugi clan lands bordered each other. He'd have the Uesugi clan distract them, whilst he got all of the western daimyos to occupy central Japan and the capital region, and this would make the forces represented by Ieyasu and the forces represented by Ishida have vaguely equal power bases in Japan, and create some sort of standoff and give Ishida a chance to win basically. Whereas if Ieyasu was able to take the first move, because he is going to begin from a stronger position, Ishida wouldn't have any chance. Yoshiaki here starts summoning his magic. Didn't know he could do that, but moments before he died as well, it almost defeated him. He summons this god of fire to take out my troops, and it's going to do an absolutely massive amount of damage actually. Let's see, Musashi and Amalia, their two units you can see on the left hand side, have been completely decimated by this attack. This is going to have to change my strategy a little bit. I'm actually going to send Musashi back to pick up some health I saw back down near the beach, and then have him show up a little bit later in the battle as a reinforcement unit for some of the later conflicts. The problem with this strategy is it means I'm dividing my command up so loosely, it's going to be very easy to forget which units have which orders and to miscoordinate things, so I'm going to have to be a little bit careful. You can see Ieyasu and Tadakatsu are gradually dying. Ieyasu in particular, they're off being completely decimated. They're surrounded on multiple sides. You can see on the map on the right hand side. They're being fired at by rifle units whilst they fight some of the Mori clan, I believe.
Giving up yet.
Anyway, so what happened when Ishida tried this plan to get the Uesugi clan to distract the Tokugawa? Well, the Tokugawa clan noticed that the Uesugi clan was building up an army before they moved, and were a little bit suspicious, so they built up an army of their own.
Time to show the
So then
strength of
basically
the
war
Oda.
had become inevitable, since both sides were arming themselves to the
Heavens
teeth.
are on our side.
He kind of knows that the Mori clan and some of the other western daimyo are going to betray him, but he has to at least pretend to trust them at this stage to stop war completely breaking out. So what he does is he moves all of his forces to deal with Uesugi, effectively saying, I trust everyone else not to invade the Tokugawa lands, whereas their army is away in the Uesugi lands trying to suppress this rebellion they're brewing up. However, he hadn't even finished marching to the Uesugi lands before he found out about this western rebellion. He found out about the Mori clan, he found out about Ishida's massive conspiracy against him, and that the Ishida forces were marching for the capital and the capital region. So he orders the Date clan to go and suppress the Uesugi clan instead of the Tokugawa, whilst he himself takes all of the forces he can muster west towards Ishida and his allies.
To the battlefield.
Both sides have enormous armies, and in fact there's only one battlefield that even has enough space for the two armies to meet each other on. So basically destiny forces them to the final battle at Sekigahara, one of the most famous battles in Japanese history, and widely regarded as the last battle in the Sengoku Jidai era, even though it technically wasn't. There was two more battles sort of a couple of decades later that were related to Sengoku Jidai, but it was the point at which peace was secured. Here in the stage, Teramoto Mori is absolutely tearing through my troops with that goddamn water wave attack, which we keep seeing and I keep getting annoyed by. Ieyasu is defeated and retreats from the field, so I failed to save him. Tadakatsu's still hanging on. You can see Nobunaga's unit though has taken heavy damage, and this is extremely dangerous because I'm going to instantly lose if he dies. He's fighting with Teramoto. I have him on the defense up buff, to try and make him die a little bit slower. I really need to get him out of this situation he's in and try and get him some support. Unfortunately, I'm fighting in front of this palisade, and behind the palisade are enemy ranged units that are firing in. So that's just going to be gradually chipping away at my health as we go. Definitely not helping. Musashi finally found that health. Now he's going to have to walk all the way back around the map to get back involved into the battle. Quite annoying. So I guess I'll talk about the Battle of Sekigahara now, because this in fact was the event that allowed Ieyasu Tokugawa to become shogun, and that was the whole thing I was trying to explain this week. In fact, the battle was so important in Japanese history that the original version of Kessen, Kessen 1, is pretty much entirely based on this one battle. I actually haven't played all of Kessen 1, I've only played the first few bits, but it definitely seemed to be the impression I got that we started at the Battle of Sekigahara and just did lots of stages related to it.
The enemy is also suffering. Remain
From the very
strong.
beginning, Tokugawa had a couple of advantages, Tokugawa's forces anyway, in this battle. One was that he knew that part of the Ishida conspiracy force was the Mori army, and he knew that the Mori army was not really willing to fight with the Tokugawa forces. He had received reports that the Teramoto Mori had been insulted by Mitsunari Ishida and wasn't really willing to support his attempt to usurp the shogunate. So perhaps he was going to prove a little bit of a nail in the side of Ishida's forces. He had a second piece of foreknowledge that he knew he might be able to use, which was that one of the Ishida generals by the name of Kobayakawa Hideaki was willing to betray Ishida once the battle started. He had agreed that once the forces actually came into conflict, he would turn and join Tokugawa's side, basically guaranteeing Tokugawa's victory. Both sides didn't actually have their full armies when the battle took place, because they had formed up so rapidly that the columns of troops on either side marching to the chosen battle site, the plains of Sekigahara, hadn't finished arriving. They hadn't finished walking onto the field, so the battle took place with both sides only having part of their army available. A lot of Ieyasu's army was actually held up fighting that guy Masayuki Sanada, who we saw a couple of stages ago. I think he's the father of Yukimura Sanada, one of the more annoying units in Kessen 3. The day of the battle itself, I guess it was kind of suitably epic. There was a deep, heavy rain over this large, wide valley plain the battle was fought in, with Tokugawa's forces moving up the valley. The Ishida army had a vastly superior position to begin with. Their their formation and positioning made them look very strong. They had a huge crescent moon formation army that stretched around the flanks of the Tokugawa army. So Tokugawa army could very easily be surrounded, and this meant they were in trouble. However, the fact that Tokugawa knew that the majority of Ishida's left flank, which was commanded by this guy Kobayakawa, was going to betray, meant that he could focus all of his attacks on Ishida's right flank, meaning that he could avoid being surrounded by just sort of only attacking the edge of Ishida's formation, knowing that he didn't need to attack the rest because they would soon be joining his side. Unfortunately for Tokugawa, when the battle actually begun, Kobayakawa didn't really go along with the plan, at least at first. His forces were stationed up on the side of a valley, looking over the battle, and Ieyasu could see them sitting there, and even after several hours of fighting, when his frontal forces were engaging with some of Ishida's samurai, he saw that they weren't moving, they weren't doing anything, so they evidently weren't obeying Ishida's orders, nor were they obeying his orders. On a similar note, the Mori force on the other side of the valley, also overlooking the battle on a hillside, wasn't moving either. The Mori army just sort of stood there and watched the fighting. So it turned out that Tokugawa was correct in gaining this information that the Mori clan wasn't willing to fight. They didn't get involved in the battle. Ieyasu comes up with a plan which I don't fully understand to solve this little situation. But first, what's going on here?
Nobunaga or whatever. You're very good. I will not fight on in a losing battle and besmirch the honor of my country. I have just learned that it is Oda that is in the right. The forces of my country shall join with Nobunaga.
So Pedro, not wanting to dishonor himself, decides to do the honorable thing and betray Mitsuhide. Very nice of him. So now we have Pedro on our side. His unit is basically dead because I've been whomping on it for so long, but at least it's a more sort of meat for the grinder situation. It's nice to have troops on your side that you have no investment in keeping alive. They're always useful as sacrifices.
They had better plan on finishing.
Anyway, Ieyasu's sneaky plan to get Kobayakawa to actually do this betrayal mission was to set up some rifle units, some musket units, sorry, and just unleash a volley in his general direction, and this apparently made him move. I don't know whether it was what sort of distance away they were or something. Maybe it was that the rifles were the signal to attack rather than they were kind of saying, I'm going to kill you if you don't betray Ishida. So I don't know exactly what's happening, but somehow Ieyasu prompts this guy to actually begin his betrayal plan, and from that moment onwards the Ishida forces are a little bit screwed because their entire left flank starts peeling off and coming round to attack their own centre. Now the Ishida forces are the ones being surrounded, and over the next couple of hours, with plenty of brutal samurai combat as hundreds of thousands of warriors fight it out in this valley, the Ishida force is destroyed and begins fleeing from the field. Many of the Western generals managed to escape the battle, including figures such as Mori and the leaders of Shimazu and Ishida himself. However, over the next week or so, a lot of them would be captured or killed in the area around the battlefield site. I believe Ishida himself was hiding in a cave, trying to avoid some of Tokugawa's search parties, and was eventually found and killed. But the actual results of the battle aren't really what's important about Sekigahara. What's important is the massive amount of political leverage it gave to Tokugawa, because as the sort of grand commander of the alliance against Ishida, he rocketed to fame and power at this moment, and it became pretty much de facto that he was the ruler. People were willing to accept his rule because he already had the most powerful clan under his own command, and he had proven that he could beat all of these other smaller clans simultaneously. So what's going on here? Murashige Araki, the guy who betrayed Nobunaga ages ago in the legend, shows up. I was kind of a little bit annoyed actually. I just thought, this guy has some nerve. We've already defeated him several times after he betrayed us, and he shows up again. So I had to quickly take him out. Luckily it wasn't too difficult. So yes, after the Battle of Sekigahara, Tokugawa effectively rules the country just because everyone respects him so much. And in fact, after a couple of years, he is made shogun. And then from then on, he is actually the ruler of Japan. So the Toyotomi dynasty has basically been completely usurped. The guy who was lined up to be shogun, now no one cares about, and there's a new shogun anyway in the Tokugawa clan. So effectively, the Tokugawa clan has taken over. However, Hideyori cannot be completely ignored because he is still at least somewhat a claimant to the shogunate. So something needs to be done about him, and Tokugawa knows this. And this led to the real final battle of the Sengoku Jidai era, coming just over a decade later at Osaka Castle, where Hideyori had been living for whilst he grew up into a potential shogun. Tokugawa knew that he had to get rid of this legitimate heir to the Toyotomi clan, just to seal off that last bit of doubt that he hadn't taken control of the land, because once the former shogunate had been completely destroyed, there'd be no possibility of people rallying around Hideyori to rebel against him or something, so he knew he had to take him out. He came up with this really fake excuse for why he could suddenly invade Osaka Castle to come and kill him. Something about bell craftsmanship, some really fake excuse. I guess people just ignored how bad it was, and he comes along and decides that he is going to, I guess he decided from the beginning he was going to kill Hideyori, though he may have at least initially pretended he was just going to imprison him or something. Unfortunately for Ieyasu, Hideyori is surrounded by this massive army of samurai who gather when they realize a battle is going to take place. Hideyori doesn't have his own army, however there are plenty of what are called Ronin samurai who just roam the land looking for someone to fight. And hundreds of thousands of these guys swarm to Osaka Castle when they realize a fight's going to break out, since it's been years since any sort of battle took place in Japan, and they've really been waiting for a fight. So Tokugawa ends up with a fairly formidable army, and at first he actually can't defeat it. Hideyori's forces keep winning. And he starts to get a little bit annoyed, and what he does is he pretends to sue for peace. He comes up with a peace deal, and Hideyori agrees to the peace because he doesn't really want to be at war. Looks like Mitsuhide is about to make another appearance.
I shall defeat you and rebuild this land!
Well, you've said that before and been proven wrong. Let's see if he'll be proven wrong this time. Yeah, so Tokugawa comes up with a fake peace deal. Hideyori accepts it, and then basically when Tokugawa is pretending to withdraw his forces, yeah, we're at peace, we're going to ignore you. At the last moment they suddenly turn around and quickly invade the castle whilst the defenders aren't expecting it. Manage to destroy the defenders, and Hideyori commits suicide. So Tokugawa succeeds in ending the last remnants of the Toyotomi clan. Interestingly, one other figure who committed suicide was Lady Yodo. Lady Yodo was the daughter of Oichi, Nobunaga's sister, who we've seen several times in the legend.
Finish them!
But anyway, yes, so the last legacy of Hideyoshi and the legacy of Nobunaga had been removed. Now this left the Tokugawa dynasty to rule Japan effectively for the next couple of hundred years under a complete aura of peace. It would also be a time of seclusion because Tokugawa would basically forbid any contact with the outside world, and Japan would go and become a rather backward nation at this period actually. They wouldn't see Westerners again for a couple of hundred years, and they would be amazed when they finally did see Westerners for the first time in the 1800s. They'd be amazed at how the Westerners appeared to be this amazing technologically advanced society, because they'd spent hundreds of years developing their society, whereas Japanese society had barely changed at all. So it was a very hostile situation when the samurai were encountered with the steamships, gunboats and riflemen of the United States hundreds of years later, and in fact that would launch another conflict which was almost as deadly as the Sengoku Jidai, known as the Boshin War. But that's a story for another time. So here in the stage you can see I've managed to hack my way through to Mitsuhide, and by sheer force of numbers I'm able to keep him occupied. I have so many units on the field at this stage that the chance of me losing is pretty damn low. Even though a lot of these units are kind of battered, especially Kicho, Amalia, Pedro's almost dead, but then who cares about Pedro? He's already been established as a little bit of a bastard. So now what's going on?
Nobunaga, Mitsuhide.
Kiss! Oh, maybe not. So they're having a little bit of a scuffle. Got their fisticuffs on. I think that just means Nobunaga's unit has begun engaging with Mitsuhide's. Nothing particularly significant. Loads of these Akechi samurai kept kind of coming out of the woods to the sides. A little bit annoying, but as I said, I have so many units that I can do what I'm doing here. Just have Amalia distract these Akechi samurai. Most everyone in the center is just whomping on Mitsuhide. Mitsuhide Akechi's unit kept restoring its health a little bit like Nakamasa Azai's was able to do in some of the levels towards the beginning of the game, which made it a little bit harder, because every time I thought I'd killed him, he would suddenly have his health restored. Nobunaga's gonna lay the beat down on him, summoning a couple of water spouts, like you do. Overall though, I thought this final level actually wasn't too hard. I did take a lot of damage to be fair, but I felt like it was kind of incidental. Like most of the damage I took was just due to that one attack by Yoshiaki, and the fact that Ieyasu Tokugawa's unit was a little bit impetuous in getting into the battle and I had to sacrifice all my own guys to save him. What I should have done is the second he came onto the field, quickly gone into my menu and given him new orders not to advance. Then things would have gone a little bit better, I think. But you're always going to make these mistakes when you play levels for the first time. So it looks like we've done it.
The battle is over. Everybody, you fought well.
He doesn't seem particularly excited for the battle to be over, despite the fact he was very excited before the battle began that it was going to be a great one. So there we go, looks like I defeated all of the named officers at least. Let's see what score I get. Not very good for troops lost, which I think is fair. Just about got the S rank though, so I'm going to get some pointless prizes that I'm not going to be able to use. Maybe you can use them when you restart the game. We'll see in a moment that there's a kind of New Game Plus feature. Whoa, that is a sweet looking set of armor, especially with that helmet. He looks damn sweet. Looks pretty good, not going to be able to use it though, as I said. And the Blue Dragon, Yinyu Dao, some sort of Chinese weapon. Ton of useless level ups, particularly for Amalia, who was 10 levels below everyone else, and some skill levels up. Very nice, but not going to be too useful at the moment. So now we have completed the last level, we're going to go on to the ending cutscene. Let's see what they've got lined up for Nobunaga's big finish. It's not his real big finish, but it's the big finish for us normal people. I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. Celebrate with a hug, why not?
Come on!
Nothing says this is the end of a game like a
Someday you
flashback.
should become a hero and make a world where you don't have to fight.
Really? Do you really promise?
Oh dear. The game decides to explain Mitsuhide's motivation at the last moment. Cram that into the story.
To keep my promise.
I know.
He's just so misunderstood. Or I guess that's the message we're supposed to get. Whoa, 2 pupils. That's something special. Meanwhile, at Sunset Beach,
The war is finally over. We have survived. We have finally won. Ouch!
harsh.
White Hawk born in the chaos of battle. You have been freed from the bonds that bound you. Now fly! Fly high! Fly quickly! Fly free!
Hooray! Kind of a weird ending. but it's not the real ending. So now we're going to progress into the credits sequence, which has this nice little series of little musical montages. I'm going to pump the volume so you can enjoy some of the high quality orchestral score of Kessen, and you can join me again after the credits where I'm going to show you the real ending to Kessen 3. So that's all for the credits. Now if you complete the game a second time on hard difficulty, which you are now allowed to do once you completed it on normal difficulty, which actually it never told you were playing on normal difficulty. It just you find out once you complete it that was just the generic level of challenge, and you have to play it again in a more challenging mode. As more enemies, the enemies are stronger, the AI is a little bit better, etc. And there's a chapter 13 as an extra part of the story you see, which it's really just like a battle against loads of random opponents. But if you complete that, this is what you see.
The Spanish army was defeated by the Oda forces. Nobunaga forced a truce to be signed between Japan and the country of Spain. This fight spelled the end of war and chaos throughout the land of Japan, and true peace was found once more.
Hooray! So Spain didn't invade Japan after all, as Pedro was hinting in the previous stage. That is the result of you doing chapter 13 in this second playthrough of the game, basically.
You too. You only wanted the love of the person you loved. Right, Mitsuhide?
Meanwhile, in Spain.
Thank you for waiting.
Oh, I bid you welcome, my Lord Protector of Japan.
Ooh. So it seems that Nobunaga has sold out to the Spanish and become some sort of vassal state in order to avoid Japan being invaded, which is in fact the peaceful solution. So he finally didn't solve the problem using war, he solved it using peace. Well done, Nobunaga. And that was the true ending to Kessen 3. And with it comes the end of this series, The Legend of Nobunaga. So I thank everyone who watched along the way and provided extra comments below the videos, adding to the history, etc. That was very useful. I might make one more little review episode with some of my thoughts on the game, but for now, you have been watching The Legend of Nobunaga, and I hope that some of the stories you've seen throughout this legend will stay with you for at least a little while. If you want to learn more about any of the characters or events you've seen in The Legend of Nobunaga, I recommend trying the Samurai Archive, an online website that has loads of at least accurate looking data on it and analysis of some of the historical sources. So that's all from me. I wish you a very nice day, and I hope you enjoyed living The Legend of Nobunaga.